What would you do if the one you swore to love turned you into a lie, a ghost they could erase with a whisper? Ethan jolted awake at 4:53 a.m., rain hammering the roof, his heart pounding in the dark, sweat soaking his shirt from a dream of Nora's voice, soft, warm, a melody from when love felt real. 5 years ago, they'd sat on a pier at dusk, her head on his shoulder, the lake rippling gold beneath a fading sun. "You're my everything," she'd murmured, her fingers laced with his, her breath a promise. At 31, he'd believed her. The world simple, his role as her anchor unshakable. Now, at 36, that anchor sank, dragging him into shadows he couldn't name. Choice 1, swallow the hurt, stay her rock? Choice 2, confront her, break the silence? Comment your pick, 1 or 2. If you love stories of resilience, reclaiming justice with style, and rediscovering your worth, hit that subscribe button for Graceful Revenge now. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Let's dive into the power of elegant revenge and life's deepest lessons together. The apartment lay cold and silent, rain drumming the windows like a restless pulse. Ethan stumbled downstairs, boots dangling from one hand, laces brushing the floor like threads of a life fraying at the edges. The kitchen smelled of stale coffee, Nora's mugs cluttering the counter, a relic of mornings he'd once cherished. She stood by the sink, her back rigid, dark hair pulled tight, stirring her coffee with a clink that grated like a warning. She didn't turn as he entered, her shoulders a wall he couldn't breach. "Morning," he rasped, voice rough, testing the air. "Morning," she snapped, sharp as frost, her tone a blade he hadn't braced for. "I need you to do something." He dropped his boots by the table, the thud heavy in the stillness. "What?" "Lila's birthday dinner's tonight," she said, pausing, her hand stilling. "Don't come." The words hit like a fist, sudden and raw, his breath catching in his throat. "What?" he choked, disbelief surging. "It's big. Lila's introducing Ryan, her new boyfriend," Nora continued, turning at last, her green eyes hard, unyielding. "I told them you fell down the stairs. It's better if you stay home." "Fell down the stairs?" His voice cracked, heat rising in his chest, the lie a slap he hadn't seen coming. "You're lying about me. To your family?" "It's not a lie. It's easier," she said, setting the mug down, her jaw tight, coffee sloshing over the rim. "You know how they are. Lila's the golden girl. Mom and Dad judge everything. I don't want you caught in their crap." "Caught in it?" He stepped closer, the floor cold under his socks, his hands clenching. "I'm your husband, Nora, not some dirty secret." "Don't make this a fight," she snapped, her gaze sliding past him, avoiding the fire in his eyes. "It's one night. Do it for me." "For you," he echoed, the words bitter, burning his tongue as he stared at her, searching for the Nora who'd clung to him in a storm, rain-soaked and laughing, whispering, "You're my safe place." That Nora was gone, drowned by the stranger who couldn't face him. A flashback hit. 3 years ago, their first apartment. A cramped space alive with smoke as she'd burned dinner. He'd pulled her close, kissing her tears away, her laughter shaky. "We'll survive," he'd said. And they'd eaten charred chicken, giggling until midnight. Love had been a quiet fire then, easy and warm. Now it was ash, stomped out by her cold dismissal, and the rain outside mirrored the storm brewing in his gut. "Fine," he said, voice flat, final, yanking on his boots, laces snapping tight. He grabbed his jacket, the door slamming behind him, the sound swallowed by the downpour. The sting stayed, sharp and deep, a wound he couldn't outrun. The warehouse loomed ahead, a gray beast of concrete and steel, its hum a steady pulse as Ethan clocked in, broom in hand. A familiar weight he'd always found grounding. Janitor work was honest, unpretentious, the dust swirling under his strokes, a rhythm against the chaos in his skull. But today, it wasn't enough. Nora's words clawed at him. Fell down the stairs. Easier. Easier for who? For her polished life? For Lila's spotlight? For Ryan, a faceless stranger he'd never met? The broom scraped harder, bristles biting concrete, his knuckles whitening around the handle. A memory flickered. 2 years back, Nora's birthday. She dragged him to a dive bar, her laughter wild as she spun him on the dance floor, the jukebox blaring a tune he couldn't name. "You're my rock," she'd said, arms tight around him, her breath sweet with rum, her pride a shield he'd worn like armor. He'd felt invincible then, her light lifting him. Now that shield rusted, wielded as a weapon to cut him down, and the contrast fueled a spark. Not just anger, but a cold, deliberate hunger he hadn't known he carried. He wasn't just this. Not fully. Vertex Tech was his truth, a company forged with Max from sleepless nights and warehouse grit, now a multi-million-dollar force in logistics AI. He'd kept it quiet, sweeping floors to test his systems, to stay rooted in the real. Nora didn't know, never asked. She saw the dirt on his boots, the calluses on his hands, and stopped looking, painting him a shadow when he was a star. That spark ignited, revenge whispering in his veins. He'd been their silent bank, $1,800 monthly for the beach house, $250 for Lila's loans, $100 for their cable, pouring sweat into their comfort while they smirked at his stained jeans. No more passive cuts. He'd make her feel it. The broom slammed against the floor, dust clouding the air, his breath sharp. Expose her lies? Ruin their night? Or walk away clean? She doesn't deserve mercy, he thought, the scrape a metronome to his rising resolve. But do I deserve spite's stain? Forgiveness felt weak, a surrender to years of shrinking under her gaze. Vengeance tempted. Make her pay, make them see. But was he above that? A memory tugged. Thanksgiving at Ellen's, her mother's sneer. Still cleaning floors? Nora silent, him writing the check later. That silence was a blade, and he'd bled quietly too long. Ethan didn't go home. The apartment was a trap. Nora's notes, her half-truths, her scent waiting to pull him back. He drove through the rain, windshield streaked, to a dive bar on the city's edge, neon buzzing open. Inside, smoke thickened the air, the jukebox wailing a lonely tune as he ordered whiskey, its burn loosening the knot in his chest. Confront her or destroy her. I could face her, he mused, glass sweating in his hand, the rain's rhythm a faint echo. Show her I'm more. She'd twist it. I could dig deeper, turn her world inside out, or leave, let them rot. What's my worth? The bar faded, his mind a battlefield of love, lost and retribution brewing. The motel room smelled of mildew and regret, rain a relentless drumbeat as Ethan sat on the sagging bed, boots still on, laces loose like his unraveling thoughts. It was 2 a.m., hours since he'd slammed the door on Nora's sobs, her voice a fading echo he refused to chase. His truck keys dangled, cold in his palm, whiskey from the bar, a dull heat that couldn't burn away the ache. Home was her domain now, a museum of their fraying marriage, every corner stained with lies he'd once ignored. He'd paid cash for this dingy refuge, the clerk's grunt a small mercy, his phone heavy with 10 unanswered calls from Nora, her desperation a scream he silenced. A memory cut through. 6 years ago, Vertex's dawn. Nora slipped into the basement at 3 a.m., hair messy, sandwiches in hand. You'll change the world. she'd whispered, her palm warm on his shoulder, her smile a spark that fueled him through code and coffee. That faith had rooted Vertex, a seed she'd nurtured. Now it was ash, and she didn't know what she'd lost. The contrast a knife, her love then, her betrayal now. His hands shook as he grabbed his phone, the screen flaring, not to call her, but to dig. He logged into their joint account, thumb trembling, the glow harsh against the motel's gloom. Rent, groceries, normal. Then he clicked a buried credit card statement, a PDF he'd never checked. His breath stopped. $2,300 in 3 months. Spa days at $400, a $600 dress, a $500 dinner he'd never tasted. His stomach twisted, hands clammy. The rain's roar deafening as doubt flared. Is this real? Am I seeing things? He scrolled, each charge a thread of deceit unraveling. A flashback hit, last summer, her girls' trip. He'd fixed a leaky sink, her Miss You text a lie as she'd spent $700 at a boutique, his sweat funding her mask. The room shrank, shadows pressing in, his pulse a hammer as suspicion hardened to certainty. She stole from me, he whispered, pacing the creaking floor, rain streaking the window like tears he wouldn't shed. He cross-checked, $300 jewelry when she'd visited Mom, $450 spa when she'd worked late. Each find was a wound, confirmation bleeding through doubt. Revenge took shape, slow, deliberate. He opened his banking app, canceling auto-pays, $1,800 beach house, $250 loans, $100 cable. Each confirm a slash, but not enough. He drafted a freeze on their cards, suspected fraud, his finger hovering, a trap to choke her next move. Leak it to her family or keep it quiet. I could forgive her, he thought, the whiskey sour in his throat, rain a mournful song. Be the fool again, she'd take more. Expose her, justice, but Lila's caught in it. Or walk, let it fester. What's right? He didn't sleep, the night forging his blade. Cancel the payments, set the trap, dig deeper. Nora's cage would become her prison. The Vertex office hummed with a late-night stillness, the faint buzz of servers a pulse as Ethan hunched over his laptop. Nora's debts a glaring map of betrayal etched in cold numbers. Rain tapped the glass beyond, a restless rhythm in the dark, its scent seeping through a cracked window, mingling with the stale coffee on his desk. His hands rested steady on the keys, but his gut churned, a storm brewing beneath his calm. The phone buzzed, slicing the quiet. Tessa's name flashing, Nora's loud cousin, who'd always dragged him into chatter when others turned away. A video call. His thumb hovered, a tremor rippling through it, the shadow shifting as he hit accept, unsure why he didn't let it fade into the night. The screen flared to life, a fancy restaurant, chandeliers casting golden flickers across white tablecloths, laughter spilling over like a tide he'd never been part of. Nora sat there, radiant, her dark hair loose, her smile wide, freer, happier than she'd been with him in years. Lila glowed beside her. Ellen and Greg clinked glasses in a toast, and Ryan, Lila's new boyfriend, grinned, oblivious to the outsider peering in. "Ethan!" Tessa yelped, fumbling the phone, her voice a jolt through the speaker that made his breath catch. He froze, heart hammering against his ribs, his face a small, stark square in the corner of their golden frame, an intruder crashing their joy. The room tilted, his hands clammy against the laptop, the rain's mournful beat a faint echo to the blood rushing in his ears. Is this real? Did I ever belong there? Doubt flickered, sharp and unbidden. He should have hung up, should have tossed the phone into the dark and buried himself in the numbers. But he watched, grip tightening, the screen's harsh glow carving lines into his face. Nora leaned into Lila, whispering something that sparked a giggle, her ease a knife twisting in his chest. Effortless, unburdened by him. Ellen raised a glass, her voice carrying a toast he couldn't hear. Greg chuckled, and Ryan's grin widened, all of them wrapped in a warmth he'd been exiled from. Then Ryan squinted, leaning closer to the screen, his brow furrowing. "Wait, Ethan! Holy shit, boss!" The table went dead, a collective gasp sucking the air dry. The clatter of a dropped fork piercing the silence like a gunshot. Nora's head snapped up, her eyes locking on the phone, wide with terror. Her wine glass slipping from her fingers to splash red across the pristine cloth. A stain blooming like her lie exposed. Ellen's breath caught in a sharp inhale. Greg's fork hit the table with a dull thud, and the air thickened with shock, heavy and suffocating. "Boss!" Lila whispered, her voice small, trembling, her hands clutching the edge of the table as if to steady herself. Ryan laughed, a clueless chuckle cutting through the tension, his grin unshaken. "Yeah, Ethan's Vertex Tech, co-founder. I've been working for him 6 months. Didn't I tell you?" Nora's face drained of color, her lips parting in a silent gasp, no sound escaping as the truth crashed over her. Ethan's chest tightened, his pulse a thunderous hammer, the rain outside a dirge, mourning what she'd buried. Vertex was his, forged from basement nights with Max, a multi-million-dollar empire he'd kept quiet, sweeping floors to test his systems, to stay grounded in the real. Nora didn't know. She'd never asked. She'd seen the dirt on his boots, the broom in his hands, and painted him a janitor, a shadow to tuck away, when he was the architect of something vast. Now the truth tore her lie wide open, raw and bleeding, a wound she couldn't bandage. "Ethan!" Her voice broke through, a desperate thread reaching across the miles, raw and pleading, but he hit end, the screen blackening, plunging him back into the office's dim solitude. His breath came fast, ragged, the room spinning as shadows deepened, the rain's patter a mirror to the chaos erupting within him. Boss. The word was a grenade, blasting through her carefully built facade, scattering the pieces of her deception. A memory surged, 3 years ago, a winter night when he'd lain feverish, shivering in their bed. Nora had stayed up, pressing cool cloths to his brow, her voice a soft lifeline. "I've got you." Her care had been a balm, her love a thread he'd clung to through the haze. Now that love was a ghost, traded for control, and the contrast burned. Her tenderness then, her betrayal now, a fire he couldn't douse. He stood, pacing the cold floor, boots scuffing against the polished tile. The rain song a haunting refrain weaving through his thoughts. Revenge flared hotter, fed by Ryan's casual words, Nora's stark terror. She'd hidden him, spent his money to keep him small, and he held the proof. Thousands in debts, her secret life laid bare in black and white. He could leak it now, tonight. Let her family see her unravel, watch the golden girl tarnish before their eyes. But the call shifted the game. Her shame was already public, raw and dripping like the wine on that tablecloth. Should I pile on or let it fester? I could forgive her, he thought, his shadow stretching long across the wall, the rain a steady beat urging him on. Go back, wipe it clean. She'd shrink me again, twist me into her lie. I could expose her deeper, those charges, her fraud, watch her burn. Or I walk, let her drown in this. What's justice here? The moral tangle tightened, his resolve a blade still unsharpened, hovering in the dark. The expo pulsed with life downtown, a chaotic swirl of lights and voices. Vertex's booth, a gleaming focal point amid the crowd of suits and flashing cameras. Ethan stood backstage, the darkness thick and enveloping, the hum of the audience a distant roar beyond the heavy curtain. Max clapped his shoulder, his voice cutting through the murk. "You're up, co-founder." Ethan stepped into the spotlight, boots scuffing the stage, the glare of the lights blinding as they seared into his eyes, his hands steady despite the tremor quaking in his chest. He spoke, short, raw, unpolished, about Vertex's birth. Late nights coding in a basement, warehouse floors he'd swept to test his systems, a dream hammered into a multi-million-dollar reality. The crowd clapped, their applause a strange, unfamiliar weight pressing against the silence he'd lived in for years, cameras flashing like stars bursting in the void. A memory flickered through the haze. 4 years ago, his first Vertex contract signed, a small victory that felt monumental then. Nora had cooked dinner that night, a rare moment of calm, her pride a quiet song as she raised a glass of cheap wine. "You're unstoppable," she'd said, her smile warm, her kiss soft against his lips, her eyes bright with a faith he'd clung to. He'd felt 10 feet tall, her light lifting him above the grind. Now that light was ash, her love a lie buried under years of dismissal, and the contrast stung. Her warmth then, her cold erasure now, a wound reopened under the stage's harsh glow. Am I overreacting? Was she ever truly proud? Doubt crept in, a shadow slithering through the glare, his voice steady, but his mind a churning sea. The air shifted, a sudden thud crashing through the hum as the auditorium doors burst open, a jarring interruption that silenced the crowd's murmurs. Nora stumbled in, her dress wrinkled and stained, her eyes wild with wine and fury, the sharp scent of jasmine, her perfume, cutting through the sterile air like a blade from the past. "Ethan!" Her voice slurred, sharp and ragged, slicing through the room's tension, her glass wobbling in her trembling hand. Heads turned, whispers rippling like a wave across the sea of faces, her figure caught in the spotlight, a broken silhouette staggering toward the stage. "You think you can ruin me? Walk away like I'm nothing?" The glass slipped from her grasp, shattering on the floor with a brittle crash, the sound echoing in the stunned silence, shards glinting under the lights, like fragments of her crumbling facade. Max moved, a shadow darting at his side, his hand reaching to intervene, but Ethan raised a palm, stepping down from the stage, the edge cold under his boots, the crowd's eyes a heavy weight pressing into his back. "Nora, go home," he said, his voice ice, cutting through her chaos, the broken glass a jagged mirror to her deceit. "No!" She jabbed a finger at him, swaying, her jasmine scent a cruel tether to days he'd once cherished, her tears catching the light like fractured stars. "You hid this, Vertex, all of it. I loved you, and you made me a fool." Her words stumbled, slurring into each other, her face a mask of rage and ruin, and doubt gnawed deeper. Did I hide too much? Was this my fault somehow? The memory of her toast clashed with her venom, love and loss tangling in his chest, like a knot he couldn't unravel. "You loved me?" His voice sliced back, steel piercing through her drunken storm, the shards of glass glinting at his feet, a testament to her lies. "You loved hiding me. You spent my money to keep me small. $2,300 in 3 months, Nora. That's not love." Her breath hitched, a choked sob escaping as the crowd gasped, a collective intake of air that thickened the tension. Security closed in, their shadows looming, but Ryan appeared first, grabbing her arm with a firm grip, his voice low and steady. "Nora, stop!" She yanked free, her glare wild, the jasmine sharp in the air. You started this! Boss! Ruined everything! Ryan's jaw tightened, his stance unshaken in her tempest. He's worth more than you ever saw. You did this to yourself. Security dragged her out, her shouts fading into the auditorium's hum, the glass shards left behind like a battlefield strewn with her defeat. Ethan stood, the crowd's gaze heavy, a sea of eyes he couldn't escape, his heart steady, but his mind a roiling battlefield. Leak the debts now? Finish her for good? Or let this public fall be enough? She's down, he thought. The darkness beyond the stage, a void swallowing her echoes. The applause a distant murmur fading into silence. I could bury her. Send it all to Ellen, Greg. Let them tear her apart. But Ryan's here. Lila's tied to him. Do I spare them? Forgive her wreckage? Or walk? Let her live with this ruin? The moral storm raged within, his resolve teetering on the edge, the jasmine lingering like a ghost he couldn't banish, pulling him back to a love he'd lost. The motel room was a damp, shadowed cave, rain pounding the thin walls with a relentless fury. The darkness thick and suffocating as Ethan sat on the sagging bed. Lila's letter crinkling in his hand like a fragile relic of a war he hadn't started. The unsent email to Ellen and Greg glowed on his laptop, a loaded weapon primed with Nora's debts. $2,300 in 3 months. Her secret life poised to unravel her world. He'd held it since the expo, her shattered glass still etched in his mind, a jagged memory that cut deeper with each replay. The rain's rhythm was a mournful dirge, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth seeping through the cracked window, his hands cold as he traced the letter's edges. Lila's plea, "Don't ruin us," echoing like a ghost in the storm. The door rattled with a sharp, urgent knock, slicing through the rain's mournful song, a sound that jolted him upright, his pulse spiking. He stood, the floor creaking beneath his boots, and opened it to find Lila, rain-soaked and trembling, her blonde hair plastered to her pale face, her eyes red with tears that mingled with the downpour. "Ethan!" she gasped, stepping in uninvited, her voice quaking, the damp clinging to her like a shroud of despair. "You can't do this!" He crossed his arms, the shadows deepening around them, his breath steady but his heart racing beneath his ribs. "Do what?" he asked, voice low and guarded. The rains beat a steady drum outside. "I know you're mad. Nora told me about the money, the expo. She's a wreck. But you can't keep going. I'm begging you, stop!" A flashback flared. Last Christmas, Ellen's dining room, the table groaning under food he'd indirectly paid for with his sweat. Nora had squeezed his hand under the cloth, her voice bright as she promised Lila a fresh start after college. "We'll help her," she'd said, her smile a quiet vow, and he'd nodded, writing the $250 check for her loans later that night. The clink of glasses, a shallow thanks he'd swallowed without protest. Now Lila stood before him, her plea a shield raised against his storm, her baby, Ryan's, a stake driven into the heart of his war. "She stole from me," he said, voice low and cutting, the rain a steady pulse beyond the walls. "Hid me, spent my money, $2,300 in months while I swept floors. Why should I stop?" Her breath hitched, a sob breaking free, tears mixing with the rain dripping from her hair, her hands trembling as she clutched her soaked coat. "Because I'm pregnant. Ryan's the father. If you destroy her, you destroy us. He's caught in this now. He works for you." The words struck like a stone, heavy and unyielding, the room shrinking as Ethan stepped back, his mind reeling, the damp air thick with her desperation. Lila pregnant. Ryan, his loyal Vertex coder, a good man tangled in Nora's wreckage. Is this my fault? Did I push too far? Doubt crept in, cold and insidious. The rain's song a mournful bridge weaving through his chaos, pulling him into the storm within. You're asking me to spare her, he said, pacing the creaking floor, the letter a weight in his hand, shadows stretching long and dark across the room. After she buried me for years? I'm asking you to spare us, Lila shot back, her voice cracking, the rain's rhythm a desperate underscore to her plea. Nora's wrong. I see that now. But if you ruin her, it's not just her. It's Mom, Dad, me, this kid. Ryan's done nothing to you. A memory tugged. Nora's pride at Vertex's early days. Her sandwiches a quiet act of love in that basement glow. Now it was Ash, and Lila's words twisted the moral knot tighter. Spare them, and Nora walked free from her sins. Send it, and he'd wound innocence caught in her blast. I could forgive her, he thought, the rain a steady drumbeat, the letter's ink blurring under his thumb as he gripped it harder, the shadows a cloak around his turmoil. Let Lila breathe, keep Ryan clear, swallow the hurt for their sake. But she'd keep taking, keep lying, shrink me back into her shadow. I could expose her, send this email, watch her burn, justice for every dollar she stole. But this baby pays, Ryan pays, and that's a weight I'd carry. Or I walk, free myself, let them drown in their own mess. What's right? He stopped, facing her, the darkness a heavy veil between them. Why should I care? Your family never did. I paid your loans, fixed your house, and you laughed at me behind my back. Lila flinched, her voice breaking, soft and raw. I didn't laugh. I didn't know. Nora said you were quiet, humble, just the janitor husband. I bought it. I'm sorry. I see you now, Ethan. Please. Her apology stung, a crack splitting his armor, the rain's mournful cadence urging a choice he wasn't ready to make. He remembered her smile at dinners, her shallow thanks for his money, blind, careless. Now she saw, but only because he held the knife, its edge gleaming in the dim light. I'll think about it, he said, voice flat and final. The decision deferred. She hesitated, her silhouette framed by the storm, then left, the door clicking shut, leaving the silence heavy with the weight of his unmade choice. Morning broke gray and heavy, the Vertex office a sleek haven of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the motel's decay as Ethan sank into his chair. The unsent email to Ellen and Greg glowing on his laptop screen like a loaded gun. The rain had slowed to a faint drip outside, its echo seeping through the window, the air carrying the sharp scent of Max's coffee as he leaned in the doorway, tie loose, mug steaming in his hand. You look like hell, Max said, voice casual but eyes piercing, cutting through the haze. Expo still eating you? More than that, Ethan muttered, rubbing his face, the laptop's warmth a steady pulse under his palms. Found Nora's debts, thousands, my money, was gonna leak it to her folks. Then Lila showed up, pregnant, Ryan's kid, begged me to stop. Max whistled low, leaning back against the frame, sipping his coffee, the steam curling like tendrils of doubt in the air. Hell of a twist. What's the play? Don't know, Ethan said, voice low and rough, the drip of rain a faint metronome threading through the silence. She stole from me, Max, hid me like I was nothing. But Lila's right. Ryan's clean, the baby's innocent. Do I spare them or finish her? A memory crept in, 5 years ago, their engagement night at a bar, Nora's vow soft against the clink of bottles. We're a team. She'd kissed him, her warmth a promise he'd built Vertex on, her faith a wind lifting him through the grind. Now that team was a lie, her betrayal a storm that had shattered his trust, and the contrast burned. Her love then, her theft now. "Tough call," Max said, his coffee's aroma sharp, a bridge to quieter days when Nora had brewed it for him, the steam a tether to mornings lost. "You've got the power now. What's it worth to you?" Ethan stared at the screen, the email a loaded weapon, his hands steady, but his mind a roiling sea, the drip a steady beat pacing his thoughts. Send it or delete it? The office hummed with a sterile calm, the faint clatter of keyboards a distant echo, the rain's whisper weaving through his indecision. "I could spare them," he mused, the screen's glow harsh against his tired eyes. Let Lila breathe. Keep Ryan clear. Nora'd lie again. Take again. Twist me back into her shadow. Expose her. Justice. But Ryan falls. The kid pays. And that's a scar I'd wear. Or walk. Free myself. Let it fade. What's my soul? A pause stretched. The drip a mournful note. His mind replaying Lila's plea. Nora's expo shame. Her wild eyes. Her shattered glass. Am I overreacting? Could I forgive her still? A flashback hit. Early marriage. A storm night when thunder shook the walls. She'd clung to him, rain lashing the windows, her voice a whisper. You're my safe place. He'd held her tight, love a shield against the chaos, a promise he'd kept while she broke hers with every hidden charge. Now that shield was ash, and doubt gnawed deeper. Was she scared, like she said? Did I miss her struggle? The coffee's scent lingered, a tether to those lost days, but her debts loomed larger, a betrayal he couldn't unsee, a weight he couldn't shake. I could forgive her, he thought, the screen's light casting shadows across his face, the drip a steady pulse urging him to choose. Be the bigger man, let it go, for Lila, for Ryan, for the echo of what we had. But she'd shrink me again, use me again, her tears just another lie to pull me back. Send it, justice, truth. But it's chaos for them, not just her, and that's a burden I'd carry. Or walk, let it all fade into the rain. What's right? He minimized the email, the decision unmade, the day dragging in a blur of doubt and indecision. The rain's faint patter softened, the office a sterile cocoon around a storm, his choice a weight unlifted, the coffee cold in Max's hand, a silent witness to the battle raging within him. Ethan had moved, a new apartment, a 6th-floor walk-up with bare hardwood and big windows spilling city light, a sanctuary he'd claimed in silence. The lease was signed with a steady hand, keys cold against his palm, the ink drying on divorce papers he'd drafted in secret. A quiet severing she'd never see coming. He'd frozen their joint cards days ago, a trap set with a single call to the bank. Suspected fraud. His voice low, the line crackling with finality. Her next charge doomed to fail, a noose tightening she wouldn't feel until it snapped. But he'd gone further, wiring a small camera into the corner of the living room weeks before leaving, its lens hidden in the shadow of a shelf. A silent sentinel he'd activated remotely, waiting for her lies to unravel on record. He'd packed light, clothes, laptop, books, leaving her mugs in the sink, her note at Mom's ignored, her world a relic he'd shed. The rain returned that Tuesday, a soft, persistent drumming against the glass, its rhythm a steady pulse as he stood in the dim kitchen, coffee brewing, its grounding scent filling the air. A knock broke the evening's calm, soft, tentative, then sharper, insistent, a sound that jolted his pulse, shadows flickering across the hardwood as he approached the door. The faint scent of jasmine seeped through before he opened it, a cruel echo of her presence, sharp and unbidden. Nora stood there, rain-soaked, her coat dripping, face gaunt, hands clasped tight before her chest. She looked fragile, a threadbare shadow of the woman he'd loved, her green eyes hollow with desperation, glinting in the hall's faint glow. "Ethan!" she whispered, stepping closer, her voice trembling, jasmine cutting through the coffee's warmth like a blade from a past he'd buried. "I need to talk." He didn't move, his frame a wall blocking the threshold, the silence thick and heavy between them, rain tapping a mournful beat outside. "What?" he asked, voice flat, hands steady at his sides, though his heart thudded, the camera's red light blinking faintly in his mind. A trap he'd set, now live. She swallowed hard, her breath hitching, tears welling as she reached into her purse with trembling fingers, pulling out a grainy ultrasound photo, black and white, a tiny shape curled in shadow. "I'm pregnant. 3 months. It's yours. I swear it." The words crashed like thunder, wild and unyielding, his chest tightening, hands shaking as he took the photo, the paper crinkling under his touch, rain streaking the window like a veil over his reeling mind. Pregnant. His? 3 months traced back to before the expo, before her debt surfaced, when he'd still lain beside her, blind to her theft. A flashback roared in. Early marriage, a lazy Sunday in bed, sunlight spilling through cracked blinds as she traced his chest with a finger, her laughter soft. "You'd be the best dad. Strong, steady," she'd said, her eyes bright with a future they'd dreamed. A kid with her smile, his quiet grit, a life painted in whispers. He'd grinned, hope blooming, a seed planted in that tender moment. Now that dream was dust, scattered by her lies, and this twist was its haunting echo. Jasmine a cruel bridge to a love he'd lost. His hands trembled, the ultrasound a weight, the room's shadows pressing in as doubt flared. Is this real? Am I overreacting again? The date stamped matched. 3 months ago, a night he dimly recalled. Her touch a lie even then. The camera hummed in his periphery, recording every word, a legal snare tightening. "Try again?" she pleaded, stepping closer, her jasmine wrapping him like a memory he wanted to burn, her tears catching the lamp's faint glow, her voice breaking with desperation. "I love you, Ethan. I see you now. Vertex. Everything. For this baby?" He stared, rain drumming relentlessly, her plea a lifeline laced with poison, his mind a storm of clashing tides. Stay for a child, rebuild? Use this tape, break her legally, walk, leave her to it? A baby, mine, changes everything, he thought, her tears glinting like fractured stars, the photo trembling in his grip, the camera's silent hum, a steady pulse beneath the rain. I could forgive her, be a father, stitch us back, love still there, buried deep. But she'd lie again, shrink me again, use this kid to chain me. I could send this recording to my lawyer. Proof she knew, proof she stole. Hurt the kid if it's real. Spite not peace. Or walk, free myself, let her carry this alone. What's my duty? A pause stretched, rain a steady pulse, Jasmine a tether to days he couldn't reclaim, the camera's lens a cold eye watching from the shadows. "Why now?" he asked, gaze piercing, the photo a cold weight in his hand, his voice low as he tested her, baiting the trap. "You didn't see me till Ryan spoke. You didn't love me till I was worth something." "I was scared," she sobbed, reaching for him, her fingers brushing his arm, trembling, her touch a ghost of warmth he pulled back from. "I didn't fit. You didn't fit their world. I messed up, I know. I used the money, okay? I shouldn't have, but I needed to keep up. For them, for us. Please, Ethan, for this baby. Her confession spilled, raw and unfiltered, the camera catching every word. Legal gold, a noose of her own making. Did I push her to this? Am I too harsh? A memory tugged, her cooking after his first Vertex win, pride in her eyes, a quiet song now drowned by her expo rage, her debts, her erasure. I could stay, he thought. The room still, ultrasound a fragile bridge, rain tapping like a clock counting down. The camera's hum, a steady undercurrent to his storm. Raise a kid, choke down the hurt. Love's echo lingers. But she'd keep me small, use me till I break, her tears a trap. She admitted it, on tape. Send this to the lawyer, file for theft, bury her legally, or walk, let her face it. He set the photo on the table, a symbolic cut, and stepped back. The camera's red light, a silent witness to her ruin. No, he said, calm, final, voice steady as stone. The trap sprung. I'm done, Nora. You don't rewrite me. She collapsed, sobs racking her, Jasmine fading as she sank, rain swallowing her cries. Ethan, please! I can't alone! You made this, he cut in, shutting the door. Wood a fortress, freedom settling like a breath long held, released into the night, the recording a blade he'd wield if she dared fight back. Weeks unfurled into a quiet rhythm. The new apartment, Ethan's sanctuary, a sixth-floor walk-up with big windows spilling city light across hardwood floors still bare of her touch, a space he'd claimed as his own. He'd built it slowly, a gray couch from a thrift shop, its rough fabric a comfort under his hands. A lamp casting soft golden glow at night, its hum a steady companion through the stillness. A table he'd yet to assemble, wood stacked in the corner like a promise to himself, a future he'd shape alone. The silence was clean, unbroken, a balm after years drowned in her noise, her voice, her lies, her jasmine scent that had once filled their old place. He'd packed light when he left, clothes folded neatly, his laptop, a box of dog-eared books from nights she'd never shared, leaving her mugs in the sink, her note at Mom's unread, her presence a ghost he'd exorcised. Vertex became his anchor, the glass tower a testament to the work he'd kept hidden, its sleek lines a contrast to the warehouse grit he'd worn like a second skin. He led meetings now, his voice firm and unyielding, boots scuffing the polished floors, his worth no longer tethered to her dismissive gaze. One afternoon, Ryan stopped by, leaning in the office doorway, hands shoved in his pockets, his grin sheepish but warm, the hum of the office a faint backdrop to his words. You good, boss? He asked, voice light, the weight of their shared chaos unspoken. Yeah, Ethan said, stacking papers with a rustle that filled the pause, his hand steady. You? Better? Ryan replied, shrugging, his ease a quiet relief. Lila's keeping it, due in 6 months. Told her I'd stay. Sorry about the chaos, man. You did me a favor, Ethan said, meeting his eyes. The memory of Ryan's boss at the expo, a crack that had shattered Nora's lie, a spark that had set him free. Ryan nodded, quick and easy, and left, his footsteps fading into the office's hum, leaving Ethan alone with the papers and the silence he'd built. A flashback flared, early days with Nora, a pier at dusk, waves whispering below as her laugh danced on the breeze, her hand warm in his. You're all I need, she'd said, her love a light he'd basked in, a moment when the world was theirs. Now that light was gone, her betrayal a shadow stretching long across the years, and the contrast ached. Her warmth then, her cold dismissal now, a wound that lingered like the scent of rain. Could I forgive her still, go back for what was? The office hummed, the lamp's glow a quiet echo in the stillness, his new life a fragile thing he'd forged from the wreckage. I could return, he thought, the papers crinkling under his hands as he pressed them flat, the rustle a steady beat against his doubt. Mend it, for the kid she claims is mine, for the echo of that love we had. But I'm whole now. She'd break me again, shrink me into her shadow, her tears just another chain. Stay free? Let her fade into her own mess? The city pulsed beyond the windows, a steady hum of life he'd claimed as his own, its lights flickering like stars he'd reached for alone. He cooked now, steak seared slow in a pan, the sizzle a rhythm he controlled, potatoes roasted golden, meals he savored alone at the table, not rushing to clean or vanish into her world. The apartment smelled of wood and coffee, not jasmine, and the silence was his to shape, a canvas painted with his own breath. Am I too harsh? Was there good left in her? A memory tugged, her nursing him through fever, her care a quiet song as she pressed cloths to his brow, her presence a comfort he'd leaned on. Now it was dissonance, a melody drowned by her deceit, and he shook it off, the papers a barrier to her pull, their rustle a reminder of the life he'd reclaimed. She's her own mess now, he mused, the lamp's hum a steady note in the quiet, his existence a foundation laid without her weight, solid and unyielding. Ethan stood at his window, the city a vibrant hum of life below, its lights blinking like stars scattered across a velvet night, the hardwood cool and smooth beneath his bare feet. Months had carved a new existence, a sixth-floor walk-up with bare walls he didn't rush to fill, a gray couch bearing only his imprint, a lamp throwing soft golden light across a room free of her shadow. Nora had faded into a distant echo, her pregnancy a question he'd left untested, her pleas swallowed by rain that no longer touched him. The air carried the faint, grounding scent of coffee brewing on the counter. Not jasmine, not her. A clean break from the tether she'd once held. He'd walked, not to destroy, but to reclaim himself, and in that choice lay a truth. Freedom wasn't revenge, it was release. A memory flickered through the stillness. 5 years ago, that pier at dusk, waves whispering secrets below as her laugh danced on the breeze, her hand warm and steady in his. You're all I need, she'd whispered, her love a light he'd lived for, a beacon in a world that felt infinite then. Now that light was ash, scattered by the winds of her betrayal, and loss had sharpened his sight to a worth she'd never seen. The rain's mournful song, a bridge he'd crossed alone to this moment. Did I overreact? Could love have lingered beneath her lies? The window's glass was cold under his palm, a pause stretching long as the city hummed its ceaseless pulse, its rhythm a mirror to his own steady breath. I could have forgiven, he thought, the lamp's glow a quiet witness in the stillness, its hum a thread weaving through his reflection. Held her the kid, clung to love's ghost, but she'd shrink me still, her tears a trap. This is peace. To hold a grudge is to carry their burden. To let go is to lighten your own, he mused, a quiet ethic born from the scars he'd borne, the coffee's faint aroma, a tether to the calm he'd forged in her absence. The past was ash swept away by time, the future an open road he'd walk alone, unburdened by her weight. What would you have done? Forgiven for a child, or walked for your soul? Reflect below, share your story, your scars. The city's hum softened into a gentle murmur, the hardwood a solid foundation beneath him, his worth a flame she'd never extinguish, burning bright in the silence he'd claimed. He turned from the window, the lamp's light spilling soft across the room, and felt it. Self-worth, hard-earned, his alone, a steady glow no shadow could dim. He was Ethan, co-founder, survivor himself, and that was enough. The rain had long since faded, its echoes lost to the night, leaving only the city's pulse and the quiet rhythm of his own breath. Lila's letter rested in a drawer, her apology a whisper he'd let lie, unanswered. Ryan had texted once, "Kids due soon. Thanks for not pushing," and Ethan hadn't replied. But the nod was there, a silent respect for the man who'd unwittingly set him free. Nora was a shadow he didn't chase, her pregnancy a question he'd face if it came. DNA, not desperation, but not now, not here. This was his dawn, his release, a life carved from his own hands, unshackled from her chains. Subscribe to Graceful Revenge Story, share this journey of retribution and redemption, and catch the next tale where shadows fall and truths rise. See you in the Graceful Revenge.